Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cybercrime. What is it and how are you affected? Apex feels it is increasingly important to inform our clients on cybersecurity as more and more people are working remotely and focused on online work. This has been a huge hot button issue here in the IT community as there's been a 600% increase in malicious emails during the pandemic alone. And we feel that it is high time to get everyone up to speed on what is out there and the types of threats we're dealing with here. This training is meant to be used for anyone, including your staff, to help educate on the current dangers out there and how to go about preventing them. So let's go ahead and just jump in and get started. Today we'll be focusing on the why, who, how, what, and wheres of cybercrime. Why cybercrime is happening, who it's happening to, how the bad guys are getting in, most importantly, what you can do to protect yourself, your family, and your employer, and last but not least, where you can go to learn more. So first, it's good to discuss why the evolution of cybercrime happened in the first place. The bottom line is that in this day and age, the bad guys no longer have to worry about being caught. So let's jump back and take a look at the timeline of the darknet here. The foundation of the internet as we know it today was developed by the US government during wartime years ago. This was called ARPANET, and it was used during the Cold War for secure communications between military installations and research institutions. Shortly after, the system was penetrated by criminals when students at MIT, which was one of those research institutions, used the institution's lab to start buying and selling marijuana under the radar. This, of course, is not entirely surprising. If there are loopholes, people will find them. As the darknet currently stands, it now serves as an invisible freeway that most of us will never experience. So think of it as an internet under the internet. Criminals have access to an open market for drugs, weapons, fake luxury goods, and everything in between. They can purchase these goods by using Bitcoin that they, in a sense, wipe, similar to money laundering, to make their transactions untraceable. This is an entire criminal ecosystem that includes its own illicit job recruitment, which is the real reason why the darknet exploded with the crime that affects individuals and organizations today. To give you a good idea of what we're looking at here, the surface web is what most of us see and use in our day-to-day. This only accounts for about 4% of estimated web content. The remaining 96% of estimated web content are sites located on the deep web and the dark web. If you take a look at the iceberg, you can see some examples of what would be on the deep web versus the dark web. The deep web refers to all the pages that are not indexed, which means search engines won't return them after a search. Essentially, you'll need to know the exact URL in order to access the web page. This includes items like academic databases, medical records, financial records, etc. The dark web goes a layer further. Although it is technically a part of the deep web, it's primarily focused on illegal activities and services. And some of you might be thinking, what does this have to do with me? Well, so the whole point here is stolen credentials and credit card information are being sold on the dark web for money, and they could be yours. Once a hacker gains access to your credentials, they can take those credentials and then test them across many different sites to see if they can gain access to even more information to sell. They typically will test things like banking sites and social media accounts. This is called credential stuffing, and it can pave the way to much larger breaches. Once a hacker has gained access to your system, they can then penetrate your entire network in about 4 hours on average. When comparing the speed of attacks from various cyber criminals across the globe, Russian hackers are easily the swiftest when it comes to gaining access of an entire network in a breach. In a global report, it was found that Russian hackers can expand their access in 19 minutes on average. That's 19 minutes from the time a vulnerability is exposed on your system to the time it takes them to see into all of your systems and information. Okay, so let's get back to what's in it for them. This card on the left here is a snapshot of a Russian dark website that sold bank and credit card information. And similar to a regular shopping cart, just like it's Amazon or something, the more items you add, the higher the dollars in the cart go. On the right side of the same image here, you can see European kroners adding up for checkout as you add the CVV number or address associated with the credit cards, because the more information they have, the more useful it is and the more the payout is. On the right here is a recent image of a darknet site. You can see how they've grown in sophistication over the years. They even have browsing categories that are all related to some sort of criminal activity like forgeries, drugs, weapons, etc. There's really no limit. This image here is an actual job ad to attract hackers. Notice the whole, try before you buy, competitive salary, breakout of payment share, etc. It's basically the underground version of Indeed or Monster.com, and the criminal architecture behind this can be very similar to the structure of an organization. This is why they do it right here. Criminals are paying good money to other criminals to receive access to cyber tools, personal data, and other cybercrime services. So even feel free to pause and take a minute to look and see how much someone can make by selling these tools and information. There's $100 per hacked email account, $150 for the credit report of someone with a credit score of 750 or higher, $200 for a remote access Trojan tool. It gets really, really crazy and it adds up quickly. It's very lucrative. This is a slide used from an RSA presentation representing the structure of organized crime. It's very similar to modern business organization chart. As you can see, there's a kingpin similar to a CEO, a technical manager like a CIO, a money operation manager similar to a CFO, etc. It's always, surprising to me to see that it is an organized crime syndicate. This is a system that has structure. It's not just, one or two one-off individuals looking to target you. There's a whole system in place here. So, what kinds of businesses do you think the cybercrime is happening to the most? Small, medium, large? Let's take a look and see what we're dealing with. There is a pretty common myth out there that this only happens to large companies. For example, many of you probably remember the Target breach. The Target hack was caused by their small HVAC vendor, actually, who had an Excel spreadsheet containing the Wi-Fi passwords for local Target locations. Local hackers were able to successfully conduct an email phishing attack on the vendor and found that spreadsheet of passwords that they had. They then went and sat outside Target and logged into the store's Wi-Fi to find that the network was not segmented, which meant that their corporate and their guest and vendor Wi-Fi were not separate. This is a major security no-no. So the hackers had full access to servers, point of sale machines, everything. It's only the large breaches like this that really make the news, but what doesn't make the news is all the smaller businesses that also fall victim to these types of breaches every single day. So why are small businesses prime targets of an attack? Let's look at some of the more obvious reasons. SMBs spend about 10% of their annual budget on IT, and that includes support like managed services. So they can't afford expensive security infrastructure or a security officer. Sometimes, oftentimes, a company's IT skill level is low, or they opt to have no IT support until something breaks. So it's more of a break fix model of IT, not very proactive, definitely not super secure. Sometimes the company has aged or unpatched devices, which creates large security holes for cyber criminals to exploit, which is why Apex really actively manages patching and rebooting of devices. Um, Oftentimes owners wear multiple hats, so they can't focus on security. Many leaders in small to medium-sized businesses believe that it won't happen to them or that their data is not valuable, which of course, is typically not true. And most importantly, small to medium-sized businesses are much further behind than enterprise organizations in educating their employees on cybersecurity. The reality is, if you look over at the example on the left here, small organizations have about the same amount of malicious emails per user per year as enterprise level organizations. And if you look at the right, I have taken a snapshot of the Verizon 2018 DBIR report that shows 58% of the organizations that fall victim of a breach are categorized as small businesses. So definitely not the minority here. All right, so let's take a deeper look. Whether a big or small business, how are the bad guys getting in? Here's a great example of the phishing process that I found online. An attacker essentially chooses a target and typically does some recon and investigation on the end user. They then gather that information that they need to best dupe their target into opening an attachment in an email. Once the email attachment is opened, malware is then deployed on the target's workstation and allows for the attacker to remote into the workstation freely. The attack then begins to deploy malware to the other workstations on the network to try to obtain admin access to the network. So much like a virus, this thing is hopping from workstation to workstation. Once the hacker has obtained admin access, data is collected from these servers. This includes things like customer information, employee information, company financial information, intellectual property, etc. The data is then transferred back to the attacker and is eventually used for identity theft, financial fraud, or redistribution and sale on the black market, like we just reviewed. Here's a great short video that will help this come alive for you a little bit. Let's take a look. This is from Cisco. It really shows how easy this whole process can be.
How did you decide to become a hacker?
Well, I'm not really sure what it means to become a hacker. It types really fast and stays up all night writing code and cracking passwords. It's not me. I just spy on people and see what makes them click. It's not a bad job.
Mark Hanning, CEO of Qualicart, set to report earnings after their blockbuster IPO.
So you consider this a job?
I put a lot of work into this. I'm not lazy. It takes research to figure out the key players, learn all about them, their families, their friends, what they care about. You have to understand the company's organization. I get a lot of my information from the sales department because they're always so quick and eager. They're hungry. People trust too easily. They don't look at the details. I do. Details matter. That's what I'm good at. It has to look completely believable. It has to look familiar. This is where research is important. It's not some generic piece of spam. It's an email from their boss with their company's signature. It's written in the voice of the boss. It's what he would say if he were writing this.
What about the malware itself? How does that work?
Somebody else out there already wrote all the code that does the actual attack. I'm just using it in the attachment. My skill is in my ability to get a bunch of people to click on that attachment. I always wonder what it's like when the whole thing unfolds on their end, when the panic sets in.
Please leave your message after the beep.
Hey, this is Rajiv in finance. Call me as soon as you get this. Something's up with my laptop. I can't.
Are you on your way into the office? Something's going on with our file server.
It's Karen in HR. Our benefits dashboard seems really slow. We're getting calls from users on it. Can you call and get this? Joining conference now.
Apparently, there's a malware attack targeting our main...
It's ransomware. They're holding us hostage.
We're locked out of everything. I can't even check my phone. What about the backup?
That will take days.
We need this fixed now. Pay it. We don't have a choice. We're reporting earnings in 2 hours.
But how do we know that they'll...
Pay it. Put every single person on getting us back up and running. That's the only priority now.
Okay, it's done.
I have the decrypt key. Mark, we have a big problem. The ransomware was just to distract us. They got inside. They got everything. Customer data, financials, everything.
Qualicart is reeling today from the news that hackers have released the personal information of nearly
The
2
Nasdaq
million
closed lower today, led by Qualicart, which was down 14% on news that their recent data breach may be far worse than the company
Its stock
originally
fell
acknowledged.
to a new all-time low on news that CEO Mark Hanning is stepping down after what is turning out to be one of the worst breaches of personal information in recent history.
Do you feel bad about releasing the personal information? All the financials? All the money that was lost?
All I did was get the files. I'm not the one that decided to release them. I'm not the one that shorted the stock. Somebody else had their reasons for that. It's above my pay grade. I was paid to do a job, and I did it well. And that's what's expected of anyone, isn't it? Anyway, Markets bounce back.
Great video from Cisco there. So now that we have some context for what that process really looks like, let's go ahead and talk about social engineering, which was a huge player in that video. About 98% of cyber attacks occur as a result of social engineering. 98%. That is huge. That is the vast majority of cyber attacks. So, what is social engineering? It is the psychological manipulation of people into performing actions or divulging confidential information. Most of the social engineering recon used to be able to target a victim successfully is of course, social media. Here's an example of my Facebook profile on the right. Um, Notice how it has my high school, relationship status, other personal information on it. You can learn a whole lot about a person from visiting their social media sites. So what I like to do is think about a private investigator. What can you receive from them in a matter of a couple of hours can be more personal information on someone than you could believe. All of someone's last known addresses, as well as all of their children's last known addresses, complete employment records for them or their children, financial institutions from their credit reports with partial account numbers, etc. If this information is available to private investigators, you can bet it's available to hackers. All they need to do is feed that information along with family and friends' names, birth dates, etc., which can all be pulled from social media into a password cracking application, and they basically have all the answers that they're looking for. So the less personal information you post about yourself and your friends and family, the safer you are. And what I would do is really take a look at your privacy and security settings on any type of social media to make sure that any miscellaneous person can't see all that information about you. All right, so on the left here is an example from a preschool where the coordinator was phoned and told that their Facebook page was infected. The cyber attacker on the other line basically offered to have a Facebook technician remote in to show her how to fix it. She then unknowingly, let them remote onto her computer, and then the IT staff ended up having to roll back 4 servers to 9 a.m. that day when the IT staff found out. The attackers had been on her computer for less than 20 minutes when she called into her managed services offering or asking for the firewall password, which was a huge red flag, of course, that something was going on. On the right is an example of a Microsoft, quote unquote, Microsoft representative calling a client and telling her that her computer was infected. She ended up spending $1,800 on, the so-called Sonic Wall software to clean it up. She was so convinced that they were legitimate that she needed a screenshot of Microsoft's actual website to prove to her, that it was in fact social engineering. She ended up calling her credit card company and was able to reverse the charge, thankfully, and they let her know that the charge originated from China. So we want to make sure to avoid any type of scams like that for sure. I just want to be clear here that your computer is not the only pieces of hardware to be concerned about. Mobile devices are fair game. As a result of malicious apps and data breaches, there's been a loss of trust dramatically from the public in the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. Of course, hot button issue right now is the app TikTok. It's, the debate is huge right now. It's very popular, but, due to their cybersecurity holes and the fact that the app agreements allow for Chinese access to end user data, it's really is something that you need to be keeping an eye on. If you look on the left here, let me get all these popped up for you. If you look on the left here, there's a snapshot from 2015 when Webroot displayed a 39% statistic around apps available on the Google Play Store that were infected before they were even downloaded. In the middle here, you can see that in 2018, Google removed 145 Android apps. That's how long it took for them to invest in cleaning up what they absolutely knew was a huge problem to users of Android devices. It was 3 years in between those two images to get them to have some action on that. Some of you also may be thinking, Is Apple better? Here, let me go ahead and go back here. The answer is, barely. As you can see from some of these headlines, Apple's dealing with the exact same problem. Better than Google, but both are displaying behavior that should have users definitely lose confidence that these organizations really care about their individual security, or at least hopefully you're skeptical at this point. We want you to be smart end users, smart consumers, and really know the risk in downloading these apps. You may also be thinking, should we just dump all of these PCs and switch to Macs? And the answer is no, there's absolutely no need. This is a huge problem that everyone is facing. This slide on the left here, and all the rest of these photos were taken at an RSA conference in 2017 and 2018, which many would consider to be the premier educational security conference in the world, where they went from dedicating a few Mac sessions back in 2016 to a half day, then a full day's worth of Mac sessions in 2018. These are samples of how many types of ransomware and malicious threats are specifically targeting Macs now. Some security analysts are actually going so far as to predict that the next big wave of damage will target Macs because so many Mac users are nonchalant about their risks and they become negligent about security. They just kind of assume that they're protected when that's definitely not the case. So let's talk about crypto mining as well. This is one that doesn't have a whole lot of spotlight on. So why is crypto mining exploding and what is it? If you've looked into cryptocurrencies and how they work, I'm sure you're aware of how complicated that is, but crypto mining is basically where a hacker implants a software program to run on your computer in the background, which then uses your computer's resources to calculate and secure a digital currency without you ever knowing it. The attacker can then gain Bitcoin by mining blocks and using your computer's resources to do it because it's very taxing on your system. This type of attack has been increasing with the increase in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency utilization. It will cause your computer to do things like slow down or your electricity bill to increase, just enough that you might not notice it. Then when they are done using your computer for mining cryptocurrency, they could also repurpose their undetected connection to your PC for another type of malicious activity like we discussed earlier. So this is really just another way for a cyber criminal to make themselves some money at your expense. So now that you understand why cybercrime is happening, who their targets are, and how they do it, let's go ahead and take a peek at what you can do to help prevent it. Here's the most important thing for you to understand. This is a screenshot of the FBI website where they have dedicated a whole section to cybercrime specifically. They have a web page for each type of cybercrime that includes a description of the crime and what you can do to prevent it. And the number one thing that they list as a tip for dealing with ransomware, as you see here, as well as every other type of cybercrime, is to educate your staff and their role in protecting the organization's data. The number one thing, guys, it is not to have a robust and correctly configured firewall, although that is super important. It is not to use a paid and reputable antivirus solution. It is not to make sure your computer is always updated against known threats. It is to make sure that the staff are aware of their shared responsibility and know how to identify threats. That's why I'm here giving this webinar. So, let's start with the importance of using strong passwords. This is one that everyone struggles with in some form or another. One of the reasons people use easy passwords, of course, is because they have to remember their passwords. On top of that, you're asked to rotate that password every 90 days, 6 months, etc. Well, before I tell you how to create and remember a strong password, let's talk about what you cannot use in your password. This is usually where, someone groans and everyone shakes their heads in dismay. It's okay though. I'm here to help you, hopefully not hurt you. So let's review the things that you cannot use in your passwords. You cannot use, your husband, wife, or children's names, the name of your company, the street address or the building number of your company, any part of the phone number of your company, your home or cell phone numbers, your birthday or any part of your birthday, your spouse's or children's birthdays, your pet's name, your parents' name, the address of the home you grew up in, etc. So I'll stop there. I know, I probably just removed all of your password options if you're anything like I was before I learned about how important this stuff is. But just keep in mind how easy it is to grab that information online, whether it's, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever. We just want to make sure that we're not using it. So instead, here's a couple of methods that I use to create a strong password that is fairly easy to remember, even when it's time for me to change it. In the first scenario here, I want you to pick a phrase. It should be about 5 words. Add capital letters, numbers, and a symbol. This is the best method for security, as passphrases are even more complicated to crack than one-word passwords with numbers and symbols alone. But if you can't remember whole passphrases, here are some alternatives that might help you out. In the second password creation scenario, I want you to pick a category of something. It can be an animal, a kitchen appliance, a movie, collector cars. I don't care, just pick a category. In my example, it's going to be an animal. Now pick something in that category, like if mine is an animal, I'll pick an antelope to start with. And then let's capitalize the second character in antelope, not the first. Everyone capitalizes the first letter, am I right? So let's go ahead and also take a look at how many letters are in the object. Antelope has 8 letters, so let's add an 8 at the end. How many vowels are in the object? Antelope has 4 vowels, so let's add a 4 to that. And what special symbol do we want to use? Let's just pick a slash right now for our example. So you can see I have my category and selected item in that category, and I've created a secure password. Now, if I always apply that same formula, I can change my animal in 90 days or 6 months to, let's say, an elephant. And in my head, I can easily create a new password. All I have to do is remember that now I'm an elephant and not an antelope. I hope that makes sense. I can't see you, and this is a pre-recorded webinar. So, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email and reach out at any time, and I'd be happy to go through this with you. The third method I'm going to show you is to use a phrase. So with the first letter of each word in the phrase, a combination of numbers and a symbol. So if my phrase is crazy hackers can't guess my password, and I use the first letter from each word, but this time I'm capitalizing the last word in the string, you get the CHCGM capital P. Then I add in numbers that can represent, how many words in the sentence or how many letters in the first full word, or really anything I want to use as my method going forward. So you're really just creating your own algorithm for how you create your passwords, and then you can mix and match as you see fit. So hopefully you can see how you can build a strong password using that method. And I hope all of you are, nodding your head, yes, this makes sense. Again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions on any of this. This is a nice infographic from Shell for their cybersecurity training. Treat your passwords like your underpants. Change them often, don't leave them lying around, and don't share them, of course. So I do recommend using a password manager as well to help you save all of your passwords. And this can allow you to create a lot of random passwords. The reason being, I'd like to see you using 1 or 2 highly secure passwords like we just reviewed to log into your network and then to log into your password manager. But then at that point, have that password manager create completely unique passwords for each website and each software application that you use. That way you truly are staying secure. On the left here are some statistics on users who use the same passwords across multiple platforms, and I just exited out because it shouldn't even matter. 1 is too many, because that means if a hacker gets one of your passwords, chances are good that they can use that same combination to get access to all of your data and potentially banking, credit card, and healthcare sites. So just like we talked about in that dark web section, stolen credentials are picked up quickly, and the first thing they do is pepper those credentials in common sites with that combination to see if they can get into something more valuable. We want to avoid this to the absolute best of our ability. So what can you do? When saving data, make sure you're saving it on the company server drives and not on your desktop. That's huge. Keeping your data securely stored in one place limits your risk, and oftentimes the company share file is a little bit more protected than your home computer, so that's important. And with COVID forcing an entire workforce to work remotely, these other items are also very important, like making sure your computer is updated with the latest paid antivirus and anti-malware updates, making sure your Windows updates are turned on. You should really spot check this monthly, especially if you are, on your home computer, and also restart your computer at least once a week in order to refresh and install those pending updates. Otherwise, they might just sit and linger and not fully get pushed out. So you should also be following your company's remote worker policies. Typically, this gives you a really good outline of what you should and should not be doing. And let's talk about the making of a domain. So I've found over the years that asking a bunch of well-meaning people like you guys to help identify a fraudulent email was a whole lot harder when you don't understand how a domain is created and how to identify what domains look suspicious in the first place. Obviously, you don't know what you don't know. So let's go ahead and take a minute to talk about that. So first of all, anyone can go to a domain provider like GoDaddy and purchase any domain they want, as long as no one else owns it. So just like in that sample video that we watched, the cyber attacker went ahead and purchased the domain qualcart.com to imitate qualicart.com. So that domain name is what you see here as the root domain example. And it always precedes the first period, which separates out the top level domain. So the top level domain here you can see is .com. Top level domains would be anything like .com, .net, .info, .gov. I'm sure you're all familiar with those. And whatever directly precedes that top level domain is the domain name that the entity has purchased, or the root domain is the official title. Whatever comes before the root domain or after the top level domain here, you can just ignore for now. It doesn't really matter for what we're talking about here today. Those typically point to specific areas of the website, and it's really only the root domain that I want you to pay attention to. Now, what the bad guys do is they go out and create a domain that looks almost exactly like your company domain, just like Qualcart. Visually, it's hard to tell that it's different. So if you look over at the right, flygirlaviation.com, trying to spot which one is the fraudulent one is very tricky. The one at the top there is using a capital I actually instead of an L, but it's really hard for the naked eye to catch. So try your best to pay attention to that stuff. But again, it's really tricky. In following the methodology of what precedes the top level domain, if you look at these two here, you can see that one of them is actually buyerrights.com and not flygirlaviation.com, because this is the domain here that directly precedes the top level domain. So this one would be the fraudulent. This one would be the correct one. Let's take it a step further. Many of you are on Twitter regularly, and something that you see on Twitter all the time is an abbreviated domain. It's usually something that starts with bit.ly dash whatever. This is called a truncated URL, and it's used to keep the character count low on the post because you're limited. But when you hover over that URL, you don't get to see where it's really going to take you. So that only works when you hover over regular domains that are not truncated. So here's a reminder for you to be safe and try to avoid those whenever possible, because you never know where it's going to take you, and it could be taking you somewhere malicious. Now let's look at web searches. When you do a search, whether you use Google, Bing, Yahoo, doesn't really matter. They will all turn up results based on what you typed in. Now the thing to be aware of is that the first line on top of each result, shown here in the blue lettering, can say anything that the web developer wants it to say. So you can have a malicious website that's completely full of infections that you want people to click on if you're a cyber criminal, and you can infect their computer and gain access to their network. And you can have that blue label say anything like best solution to clean up temporary files on your computer and help with speed in that blue header if you wanted to. What you want to do is always look closely at what is shown here in green right below the header. That's the actual URL. And we just learned how to spot the top level domain and what directly precedes that as the root domain. And now we know what actual website we would be clicking on. So the example here, this one would actually be called malwarefox.com. That's the site it's bringing you to. So what if you're unsure that the website is safe? Maybe it's something that you've never visited before, so you don't really know either way. Something that you can do is you can always copy that URL by dragging backwards on it with your mouse, not by clicking on it, because that will bring you directly to the place that you're skeptical of, and you don't want to do that. But you drag backwards on it and copy it. And what you can do is go to virustotal.com. This is a website that's used by law enforcement agencies around the world, and it's supported by 62 different antivirus and anti-malware vendors. And what this will do is scan that URL by those 62 different databases and then tell you if that website has any malicious content in it. Same thing for a file that you are unsure of opening or an email with a hyperlink that you're not sure about. You can, of course, always forward it to the help desk here, but you can also forward that email to scan@virustotal.com, and it will reply back with the results of scanning that URL or attachment with the 62 different databases. Don't worry about writing that down. We've included that in the email. This training link is attached to with the resources and tools form that we're sending out for your reference. So you should be able to access that easily down the road. But speaking of emails and attachments and links to click on, you all know how important this is by now. Let's look at a sample inbox. You'll probably recognize this as a snip from Outlook, which is what I and many others use for email. You can see that the one from Time Warner is an important notice about this user's account. Well, that looks important, doesn't it? Let's go ahead and open that up and take a look. Well, first of all, just because it says it's from Time Warner Cable does not mean that it is from Time Warner Cable. So, like we went over previously, IT people like myself can create a domain, just like we talked about, and add emails to that domain, and we can name that email account, the display name that you see there, anything we want it to be. So anything that we want this to be, we can make it. If I wanted to send out emails from Mickey Mouse, I could. It's super easy to make this anything we want. There are certain signs that you can look out for to detect a phishing email, just as a precursor if you are suspicious. If the sender email address is incorrect or the logo of the company is misplaced or off color in any way, if the logo is missing altogether, if there is a URL that has a state of urgency attached to it, etc. Those are typical signs of a malicious email. On this one in particular, let's go ahead and open it and investigate even further. If you have opened this on a Mac or a PC, you can always hover over the destination of that hyperlink and see where it will take you if you click on it. Now, again, if we use our criteria for a valid domain, we can see that the root domain is Time Warner Cable and the top level is .com. And we know we ignore what precedes the root domain and follows the top level domain, all that stuff we just went over. So this link should actually be safe to click on. But as we know, you can't hover over a hyperlink on a mobile device. So if you're doing this from a mobile device, please don't click on anything at all, no matter how legit it looks. It can wait, hopefully until you get into the office or until you get home, and then you can investigate from there. But you never know with your phone, so avoid that whenever possible. Another thing that you can do is make sure that your data is encrypted. Make sure that your workstations and servers at the office are encrypted. Make sure your home computers are encrypted. Windows 10 comes with BitLocker, so I recommend you turning that on if you can. I mean, a lot of you may end up saving a lot of your company work on your personal devices, so encryption is really important if you don't want anyone to access that. Because if the hard drive is not encrypted and someone steals it, they don't even need your password to access that data. All they need to do is remove that hard drive and hook it up to their computer and then browse the files to see, if they want to read any of it. Of course, unless you've encrypted that data, in which case it just looks like, gobbledygook and it means nothing to them. It's worthless. So highly recommend encrypting anything that you can. You should also consider remote wipe capabilities for your mobile devices. So, if someone steals your phone out of your hand and you have it open and logged in with your passcode, or you're logged into social media or your work email, you want to have the ability for your IT department to remotely wipe it if they can, or at least prevent access to your company email account. So encrypt what we can and see if there's a backup means to being able to block access on any of your mobile devices. And here's also something that's really important to consider. Your home network is often being used to access company data, especially now with everyone working remote. So how many of you have had your internet installed a couple of years ago? I bet you it's quite a few of you. I'm sure the technician came in and set up your home Wi-Fi and made sure everything had a good password and it was secure. But do you know if your router has been updated since then? How about, have you changed your home password for your Wi-Fi? What about all the other devices that are connecting to your network at home, like Google Homes, Wi-Fi capable DVD and Blu-ray players? How secure are they? Did they come with the default admin username and password that is the same for everyone? Did you customize it? These are things that you should really start considering. If you install a Ring camera or Alexa, did you make sure to change the passwords to something very secure? It's important to remember that how diligent you are about your home network and your personal devices, those are the same habits that you're going to be using at your office. We want you to try to view every device as a potential threat vector for bad guys to get in. We want you to actively care about this stuff because it's your data. If you're not sure that your home network is set up securely, please, reach out, get in touch with an IT person to have them review it for you. Um, and let's agree for another thing, especially with kids being home at the beginning of this year, learning remotely. Let's not be using our devices that we use for work with all of our company data and hand that over to our 4-year-olds, to play on the iPad or the phone. Because they have, especially if they have permissions to install anything from any pop-up they get, right? Like we just discussed with the apps in the Google Play Store and the Android and the Apple App Store. So let's break these habits now when we can. Speaking of mobile devices, again, we reviewed how many apps are infected on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. So let's make sure that they have their privacy settings set up correctly. We won't walk through these today because it can be a little bit time consuming and specific to the individual, but I'll send the follow-up email with some follow-up resources. I want you to download the correct software for your Android and walk through those privacy settings and get rid of any bad apps that could potentially be on there. Of course, if you're an iPhone user, we'll get you those instructions as well, so you can do the same. It's personal mission of mine because I don't want your life exposed without you at least full well knowing what the potential risks there are and what's exactly happening there. So I want you to be aware of whether or not you are allowing Facebook to upload every picture you take on your phone to their servers with your contacts list, with them knowing where you were when that photo was taken because you have the location services turned on your phone. Allowing them to run facial recognition software and identifying who you are with. It is kind of horrifying, the invasion of privacy that app developers are participating in. At least you should know what your options are so you can make an informed decision on who can see what. So please review all of that stuff as soon as possible. And our final thing to review today is what to do if you click on something you think you shouldn't have. Remember, time is critical. Just because you click on something and your machine doesn't immediately freeze or give an indication that you have been compromised does not mean that you have not been compromised. So if you're suspicious of anything, call the help desk. Tell them what you clicked on and why you're concerned. They're pretty good at knowing if something is innocuous or legitimately a concern. They will do some base investigation and let you know if you can go back to work and everything's fine, or if there's a legitimate security concern that they need to continue remediating, and they'll take it from there. It is always helpful to add snapshots of whatever pop-up you're seeing or the website redirect. And also make sure that if you're emailing in the ticket to label it as urgent so we know to get it addressed as soon as possible because, again, time is of the essence. So you might be thinking, where do I go from here? Now that you're more aware of the threats that are out there and what cybercrime looks like, your mind is probably racing and you're probably thinking, what else can I do? My business is important to me. I want to make sure it's protected. And it's important to know that cybersecurity encompasses a lot more than the things that we discussed in this training alone. Cybersecurity involves firewalls for content filtering and protecting your network. It involves backups in the event of a disaster or security breach, VPNs for secure connections, patching to keep your system secure, and everything in between. We understand that this can be definitely an overwhelming thing to digest, and the first real step we recommend you take is to understand where your organization is at with your security. Talk to your VCIOs about getting a security assessment. We offer a few different security assessments, so whether you are a small organization of 5 people or a medium-sized organization of 200 people, there is an option for you. We will go in and evaluate your infrastructure, patching, processes, etc., and lay out all of our findings with you. At the end of the assessment, then you'll have a whole list of addressable items sorted by priority to give you a plan on what moving ahead to secure your organization would look like. So it's a great way to know what you may not know about your organization, and I would highly recommend it, or at least starting that discussion with your VCIO or your client lead to really take a look at where you're at. We also have a cybersecurity division here at Apex that is separate from our managed services that you may or may not be familiar with, called Digital Umbrella. I'll add the link to the resources sheet as well if you guys want to check that out. I will have another security training coming out that goes into much more detail on that. This presentation was really focused on cybercrime, and in the follow-up webinar, I'll be focused on cybersecurity. So I highly recommend you tune into that as well to give you a full broad understanding of what that whole package looks like. I hope you learned something new and you start thinking more about, cybercrime and what you can do in your day-to-day to prevent something bad from happening. Feel free to share this with your peers. And again, thank you so much. I hope you have a great day. Feel free to reach out to me or your VCIO if you're not my client, and start having these conversations. They're something that everyone should be considering. All right. Thank you so much.